It started like something out of a small-town drama. The kind of story you almost wouldn't believe if you didn't see it happen with your own eyes. A quiet lake, calm waters, families enjoying the view, and neighbors who thought they had power over something that was never theirs. The Homeowners Association, better known as the HOA, had built up a reputation for being strict, controlling, and always ready to push their weight around. But this time, they picked the wrong person to mess with. At the center of it all was a man who just wanted peace and privacy. He wasn't loud, he wasn't looking for trouble, and he certainly wasn't trying to make headlines. He had bought land by the lake, fair and square, worked hard for it, and quietly built a life he was proud of. To him, that lake wasn't just water, was history, memories, and the reward of years of effort. What the HOA didn't know was that their beloved community docks, the very ones they thought they controlled, sat on land he actually owned. And when they tried to tell him what he could and couldn't do with his own property, things quickly started heating up. The HOA, confident, as always, believed they had the upper hand. They sent letters, warnings, and even threats, convinced they could push him into backing down. They assumed he would fold under the pressure like so many others before him. But this man wasn't about to be bullied. He knew his rights, and he knew something that would flip the whole situation upside down. Neighbors started whispering. Could the HOA really take his lake? Could they force him to give up what was rightfully his? Or was the entire board about to be exposed for overstepping their boundaries? The tension grew thicker every day, with the HOA digging in deeper, and the man calmly preparing his next move. What came next was a shocking twist that nobody saw coming. The very people who thought they were in control were about to find out that their power didn't reach as far as they believed. And when the truth finally came out, it left the entire neighborhood stunned, wondering how they could have gotten it so wrong. But the real question is, what exactly did he do to shut them down? And how did the HOA react when they realized they had picked a fight they couldn't win? The roots of this fight went back years, long before the HOA ever tried to step in. The man had purchased the property because he wanted a place where he could breathe, where the water and trees gave him peace after long days of hard work. He wasn't flashy, didn't brag about what he owned. And most of the neighborhood barely knew the full story of how the land around the lake was divided. What mattered to him was that it was his, paid for, legally, documented, and protected. But for the HOA, that quiet ownership was almost invisible. They assumed the docks, the paths, even parts of the lake fell under their control simply because they'd always acted like they did. Behind the scenes, the HOA board members were used to winning. They had a pattern of scaring off anyone who challenged them. New residents often gave in to their demands, signing rules they didn't fully understand just to keep the peace. The board believed they were untouchable. But this time, their confidence was about to clash with a man who wasn't intimidated by letters or meetings. When he received the first warning, he didn't react right away. He studied it, kept it tucked away with his papers, and calmly made sure he knew exactly where he stood. He pulled out old maps, property lines, and legal documents that told a very different story than the HOA wanted to admit. Neighbors noticed the tension growing, but didn't know the full truth. Some whispered that he was being stubborn. Others quietly admired the fact that he wasn't backing down. The board kept pushing, blind to the fact that the very ground beneath their prized docks was not theirs to claim. And while they plotted their next move, he was preparing something far more powerful, evidence that could change everything. The lake itself had always been a point of pride for the neighborhood. Families gathered there on weekends, kids fished off the docks, and the HOA often pointed to it as one of the community's crown jewels. They spoke about it as though it belonged entirely to them, weaving it into newsletters and meetings like it was their personal achievement. But beneath all the talk, very few people actually knew who had the legal rights to that water's edge. That gap in knowledge is exactly what gave the HOA the confidence to push harder. The man at the center of this storm stayed quiet, watching and waiting. He wasn't the type to raise his voice or cause unnecessary trouble, but he carried himself with the kind of patience that comes from years of being underestimated. He knew that patience could be powerful. While the HOA tried to make him out as difficult and uncooperative, he was carefully collecting every detailed signatures, maps, and records that told the story the HOA didn't want out in the open. Some of the board members saw him as just one person standing against a group, an easy battle they could win with their usual tactics. But what they didn't realize was that this man wasn't standing alone. He had history on his side, ownership papers that didn't bend to intimidation, and a determination that grew stronger with each letter shoved into his mailbox. The whispers among neighbors grew louder. People wondered what the HOA was hiding. Why were they so insistent on taking control of something that didn't truly belong to them? And why did the man remain so calm, even as pressure mounted? The cracks in the HOA's confidence were beginning to show, but they still had no idea how badly they had miscalculated. The pressure reached a boiling point when the HOA decided to go public with their demands. They sent out notices to the entire neighborhood, announcing new rules for the use of the lake and the docks, as if they owned every inch of it. They spoke with authority, listing restrictions, fines, and penalties, expecting everyone to fall in line. Neighbors who had no idea of the real ownership started to believe the HOA had full control. Whispers turned into heated conversations, and all eyes slowly turned toward the one man who hadn't bowed down. Instead of panicking, he grew quieter. Each move by the board only pushed him closer to the moment he knew was coming. While they bragged about enforcing their will, he carried folders full of documents, proof no meeting agenda could erase. Every letter, every map, every survey line told the same story. The HOA's docks rested firmly on land they didn't own. Behind closed doors, the board argued among themselves. Some members began to worry, questioning if they'd pushed too far. Others doubled down, insisting they had the power to take what they wanted. The man's silence unnerved them. He didn't protest loudly, didn't storm into meetings. He simply prepared, waiting for the perfect moment. Neighbors started noticing the shift. Why wasn't he breaking? Why wasn't he caving under the pressure like everyone else before him? Rumors spread that he had something big, something the board didn't see coming. Each day the tension thickened, the lake itself becoming a symbol of a fight that was no longer about water or docks. It was about pride, power, and truth. By the time the HOA tried to tighten their grip even further, the stage was set. The man had everything ready, and the board was walking straight into the biggest shock of their lives, just when it seemed like the tension couldn't get any higher. A new twist sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. The HOA, desperate to prove their authority, decided to take a bold step. They tried to file an official claim over the lake access itself. They believed that by putting it on record, they could cement control once and for all. To most residents, it sounded final, like the board had closed the door on the debate. But in reality, this reckless move only set the stage for something far more explosive. What the HOA didn't realize was that their own filing opened a trail that could be traced. By putting everything in writing, they had unintentionally handed the man the very evidence he needed to expose their overreach. Still, he stayed silent, letting them tighten the knot around themselves. Neighbors couldn't figure it out. Some thought he was defeated. Others whispered that he was planning something that would shake the entire HOA to its core. Then came the second surprise. While going through old records, the man discovered that not only did he own the land under the docks, he also held partial rights to a section of the shoreline the HOA had been using for years. Every picnic, every boat launch, every community event the board proudly ran had actually been taking place on property they didn't control. The revelation raised the stakes dramatically. This wasn't just about one dock anymore. This was about the very image of power the HOA had built in front of the whole community. The board had no clue what was about to hit them. Their confidence blinded them, even as neighbors started questioning if the HOA had ever truly been in charge. And with every passing day, the man in the middle of it all was getting closer to revealing a truth that could flip the entire neighborhood upside down. The breaking point came at a packed HOA meeting. Neighbors filled every chair, buzzing with curiosity about what would happen next. The board sat at the front, confident and stern, ready to announce their so-called final ruling over the lake and the docks. But before they could speak, the man quietly stood, holding a folder that seemed too ordinary to carry such weight. The room fell silent as he walked forward, his calm presence commanding more attention than any speech the HOA had ever given. One by one, he laid out the documents on the table: property deeds, survey maps, and official records stamped and signed. Every page told the same story: the docks, the shoreline, and the very land the HOA had been boasting about belonged not to the association, but to him. Gasps rippled through the room as neighbors leaned forward, realizing the truth they had never been told. The board members shifted uncomfortably, their authority crumbling in plain sight. But just when it seemed the showdown was over, he revealed the twist no one expected. Along with the deeds, he produced papers showing that, years ago, the HOA had unknowingly signed agreements acknowledging his ownership when they first built the docks. They hadn't just overstepped, they had legally tied themselves to his property without even realizing it. The room erupted. Neighbors were stunned, whispering about how the HOA had been running events and enforcing rules on land that was never theirs to begin with. The board, once so powerful, sat speechless. They had no claim, no leverage, and no way to argue against the documents in front of them. And as the man gathered his papers and turned back to the crowd, he didn't shout or gloat. He simply reminded them that power doesn't come from intimidation, comes from truth. The HOA had tried to take his lake, but in the end, they were the ones standing on borrowed ground. And with that, the story of who really owned the lake was no longer a mystery, was undeniable after that night. The entire neighborhood seemed different. The tension that had been hanging over the lake finally lifted, and for the first time, people could see the truth with their own eyes. The HOA's reputation, once built on fear and control, had taken a hit it could never recover from. Board members who once spoke with authority now avoided the spotlight, while neighbors who had stayed quiet began speaking up about their own frustrations. With the HOA, the man who had stood his ground didn't ask for praise, but he earned respect from nearly everyone. The lake itself became more than just a body of water. It turned into a reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked, and how one person with patience and proof can change the outcome of an entire community. Families still fished off the docks, kids still played along the shoreline. But now they did so with the understanding that it was thanks to the man who refused to be bullied. There were whispers that some board members considered resigning, while others tried to quietly repair their image. But the damage was done. The story of how the HOA tried to steal the lake and lost had spread far beyond the neighborhood, becoming almost legendary in nearby communities. It was a cautionary tale about arrogance, property rights, and the importance of standing firm when you know the truth is on your side. In the end, the man didn't just protect his land, he changed the balance of power. The HOA had learned the hard way that ownership isn't about who shouts the loudest. It's about what's real, what's fair, and what's written in stone. And that lake, calm and steady, stood as proof that justice had finally found its place.